Hey everybody, Cindy Daychuck here with Queen Bee Creations. Welcome to the channel. You know, the new IOD release has been out, and like every new release, it's wonderful, and everybody wants all the things. But unfortunately, as a shop owner, I hear often that people can't afford all the things, and they get disappointed because they see fabulous projects that people are making, and they've got a limited budget. So today's craft, I want to give you some alternatives. We're gonna be using, my internet's down here, so I'm filming when it's noisy because I have to be doing something. I can't just be staring at the walls. So bear with the noise from next door. So I want to give you some alternatives, ways to be able to cut costs. I mean, obviously things like the molds are a good investment because they're reusable, right? So they don't disappear. You get to use them over and over and over again. And so I want to give you a bit of an alternative to clay. I'm going to be using some clay, but I'm going to give you some options. Now, this is an old thrifted frame. So I'm going to be working directly on the glass, but if you had a frame that has a hard wood backing and no glass, you could do this on that. So you just want a sturdy surface, and I don't have one, so I'm using the glass. It's fine no matter what. So I want to add texture onto the back of this. You could do that a number of ways. You could use spackle, you could use the IOD clay rolled out really thin, but those are items that you have to go out and buy special. So I wanted to show you a way that you could do it likely with stuff that you have in your house. First of all, because we're using toilet paper, and I don't need to know you well to know y'all got this. The other thing that we're going to be doing, and I'm giving you an alternative to Mod Podge. So you could do this with Mod Podge, you could dilute it down. But again, that's kind of a specialty item. Now, the one thing that you would need in lieu of Mod Podge is just white craft glue, which you could get from the dollar store. And you're not going to need tons because we're going to be diluting it. So I have water and I have glue. And if you were using Mod Podge, you would likely want to dilute that too. So there's no magic to this formula, so don't sweat it, guys. Just mix some up, right? Oh, my stir stick's all broken. You know, I don't know what that was. Maybe at most, it was 50-50. Now I got glue all down the side of my bottle, so let me get rid of that. Okay, at the most it was 50-50. It was probably a little bit more water than that. So, old paintbrush. This is just an old chip brush. And we are gonna create some texture. So I'm just going to, now, you know what? The glass, so noisy. The glass is going to resist, but that's okay because it'll start the adhesion process, and then we're gonna keep going. So all I'm going to do is I am going to wet my surface with my glue mixture, and I'm gonna start just kind of laying my toilet paper into it. Now I'm being more careful than it actually deserves because we're gonna be building up layers. We're gonna make this have some thickness and some depth to it. So you know what? You don't have to be particularly careful. I just don't want to have tons going up the edge of my frame. And here, you know what? Just tap in pieces. There's no magic to this. I just can't, my finger is still weird and I can't fit it all in there. So I'm just making it kind of go edge to edge, no magic to this. I've got that first layer down, and now I'm just gonna dab more glue on it. So I'm just going to, it's hard to paint this because So the dabbing motion is the way to go, because if you try and paint, it's just gonna swipe off, right? So just kind of dab it. And then we're gonna put another layer on. And for this, I'm gonna want a fair depth to it because we wanna add some texture. Now, this already is gonna have texture. You're gonna see it's all kind of wrinkling up and it's bulging up, and that's all cool. That's all okay, right? So the nice thing about this is you can't mess it up. So you gotta love crafts where that's the case, right? We're just creating a little bit of an interesting background for our vignette, like as we're using the molds. And I get a lot of people often are saying, well, you know, I'm doing the project that I saw on Pinterest, but their background is awesome and my background is boring. It's because they do weird stuff like this. So that's all wet. I'm just gonna take my toilet paper and I'm gonna do the same thing. Now, I kind of went down, so this time I'm just gonna go across, and this side is really particularly torn, so I'm just gonna put this one in there a little bit neater, but you know what? It probably doesn't matter in the least, right? It's just, it's all okay. So you just carry on the same way and you build up layers, probably about 5 or 6. I'm going to continue with this, and when I have enough layers built up, I'll come back to you. I'll let you know how many I did, and then we will carry on with the next part. Okay, so I have about 5 to 6 layers on here. I'm just taking a little squeegee and just pushing some of my edges down just to clean those up a little bit. You could take a little knife, you could take a little spatula. I mean, we are using what we got, right? This is all about alternative ways of getting stuff done. Okay. So the idea is that I've got the last coat on here. So it's wet, it's squishy, and I used pretty much that entire glass. So the next part of the process is to create just some design. Now, obviously, if you have some IOD stamps, you could stamp in. We're impressing an image into this, which really means we're just pressing stuff in. So you could use any of those stamps. You could take little stamps that you have for your kids, right? And we can push that in. Now, because I have glass, I don't want to push too hard, but it leaves the image in there. Can you see that little tulip going up the side, right? So we can push that in and we can create that image so that it's going to dry like that. We can take stuff. I mean, this is a little piece of, I don't know, they're kind of like little glitter things. And I could just lay that down. Here's little snowflakes. I'm just going with what's on my work table, which gives you an idea of how messy my work table is, because I still have all this stuff all over from Christmas. So I'm just laying those guys in. I got this heart. I don't even know if that will work. But, you know, if I push it in and rotate it around, maybe, because it's obviously way deeper. Oh, it gives an impression. I have a cut-off bottle, so I could make circles in here. I could take an old piece of cardboard. So, you know, look at the texture in there, and I can create some lines and texture in there. It doesn't matter. So these ones up here, you know, I have a brayer, so I'm just going to roll them in. You could just finger push. Oh, and I've got to finger push these guys, the stars anyway. so noisy. Knobs, old knobs that have some patterning on them. You could stamp those images in. Oh, that one's kind of cool. Okay, let's do it coming down here. So you can see there's nothing that you can't use, and you don't have to have anything fancy. Let's have that coming across again. I'm liking this one. This is a good one, guys. I got this from the dollar store, this little roll of them, and I just trimmed off a little piece. Okay, you could wash that and still use that even. So, what else is on my desk that may be cool? Everything seems to be circles on my desk, so. Oh, well, you know what? For my Dremel, I could just kind of wheel that baby up, make a couple of lines here and there. I'm not even sure. Okay, that kind of cuts my fabric. That might be a little too sharp. That's making beyond indents. But, oh, I have a stencil brush. You know what? You just get to play. Certainly if you wanted words in there, you could press in with, you know, your letter stamps. These work great. And again, you know, you probably, if you have kids, you got a mess of these all over. So you don't even need to have stamps. You could just use stuff. Anything that's hanging out in your house, you could push in to be able to create some pattern. So now that we've got some pattern on here, we need to let this dry. So before we can carry on with doing the next piece, we need this to be dry so that our next pieces, which are our raised pieces from our molds, that they can, in fact, be glued onto something. So we're gonna set this aside, let it dry, and then I'll come back. Our board is dry now, and we've got these wonderful impressions, awesome texture. It's going to show up lots of that when we get to that point. What I want to do is I want to add to it. Now, I want to show you some options. I'm going to switch to using some clay, but I want to show you how you can use your molds with the toilet paper idea to be able to create your impressions. So I'm gonna do one for you and put it off to the side to dry, but I did a couple yesterday to dry overnight. And in essence, look at, they pop out so easily. And oh, look at the level of detail. So you can create here's your little wheat. You've got all of the details, you've got all the impressions. So you can create all of the pieces that you need in exactly the way I'm going to show you using the toilet paper. Now this is also a great way to be able to create a lot of little embellishments for, because look at how thin I have that. For your junk journals, for any of your scrapbooking crafts, because you can do them quite thin, they're quite light, and you're gonna be able to paint them out. So to do this, just cut up a bunch of little squares of toilet paper. I have my glue mixture. I'm gonna take a piece of toilet paper and let's do, which shaft of wheat did I do? Okay, I'm gonna do the wheat the opposite direction. And I'm just gonna start to use my glue laden, my glue mixture laden paintbrush and start to just push that toilet paper down into my mold. So it just kind of gets wet, kind of mushes down in there. Take another piece. Didn't even have it in my hand. Take another piece and just start layering it up. You can build this up as thick as you want, depending upon the project that you have in mind for it. And the great thing about the IOD molds is that micro rim, okay, I don't know why that was hard to say, but it serves as a great kind of cutting point or push point against which you're able to just kind of take your toilet paper and kind of push it in. So you can do this and just be able to create all of your molds. Now, here's the other cool thing about this technique. You can take the IOD stamps, so a big image of the stamp, and you can do this same thing, kind of pushing it down into the stamp, let it dry, peel it back, and have a whole kind of embossed piece of paper. So cool. So we were pushing the stamps in, but you could also do this technique on the top of the stamp and then let it dry, and then have that entire figure that you can, in essence, just kind of cut out and cut around and then apply onto things. So this is something that, again, you can kind of do ahead of time. You could have a baggie filled with all these little bits and pieces. So, you know, if you were doing junk journaling or you were doing scrapbooking, you could pull out whichever ones you needed that kind of worked for your project and just kind of have them ready to go. I mean, you can do that with the clay too. But I just wanted to show you an alternative, because I do get people popping into the store that, you know, they want their money to go into the molds and they want to have all the things, but it gets a little pricey for them. And so they're looking for some ways of being able to have their money go further. This toilet paper hack is a great way to do that. So I'm going to put this off to the side, let it dry, and then tomorrow I'll be able to pull it out, and I'll have another matching little piece that I will use in another project. So never goes to waste. So for this board, what I wanted to do was start to play with the new IOD molds. We're going to start with one of the little doors. So this is the hidden hollow mold. So I'm going to steal these out of inventory for myself now. Just have to look for the opening. And these new molds are so incredibly detailed. These little fairy doors, they've even got like the wood grain in them. They're just delightful. So I'm looking at maybe taking this big wide one, this guy, and using it. So I am just going to put some cornstarch into here because of all those details. I want to make sure that my clay picks them all up and that my clay releases. These are obviously going to be awesome for those of you using resin and that would prefer to do it with resin. You're going to get all those amazing details, and it's crazy. I think this would be lovely doing this with some fondant and having like, you know, the fairy door on a cake with some of the mushrooms and some of the little, you know, so the mushrooms from the toadstool, having, you know, some snails and some ladybugs from the dewdrop pond mold. Just so many things that you can do with this that would be incredible. But all I'm going to do is I'm going to put my cornstarch in there. It just helps to be able to release it. Take out my air dry clay, and I always have a little piece of paper towel in there. That's pretty dry now, but I keep it just lightly damp, and it makes my clay totally pliable. If your clay ever dries out, put it in a plastic bag with a damp paper towel and keep doing that until it absorbs enough liquid back that's nice and pliable again. But you just simply push this against that micro rim and I want to make sure that it's pushed in well enough. It's just a little challenging with my recovering broken finger here. Keep it out of the way. It's not quite up to pushing clay yet. So flip it over and then just gently kind of peel that mold away. Oh my goodness gracious. This is just lovely. Look at the detail in that, guys. That's incredible. So I am looking at that sitting right down in the middle. And now I just want to fill this out a little bit. I'm going to take some of the, you know, a couple of the little mushrooms and have those down along the edge. I've got the fern with the caterpillar, so I'm going to use all 3 molds. I'm taking them all. I think I might need to reorder some already. I was holding off to let other people buy first, but I'm sorry, I got videos. So I am going to get all my little figures here, and I will probably, you know, like there's a delightful dragonfly. I'll probably have him coming off the edge, so I'm going to use the edge of the frame too. I mean, there's some little snails. I think I'll have a snail crawling up the side. So I'm going to use the frame as part of the picture. When I go to glue them, I am just going to be using some Gorilla Wood glue because that's what I have in the shop. But you could use any white tacky glue on something like this. So once I have my molds all done and laid out where I want them, I'm going to flip them over. I'm going to spread out some glue on the backing, glue them in place, and I'm going to leave them overnight. And then we'll come back and we'll start painting. My molds aren't fully dry on this, and you can tell because they're cold to the touch. This is what I did, keeping it fairly simple, right? The little snail crawling up, some of the mushrooms going off onto the frame, and certainly the dragonfly flowing down. And again, we have a lot of detail in the backing. So what I want to do is keep this fairly neutral, almost sepia toned, okay? So these work great with adding lots of color to them, but they also look good just on their own because of details. So what I have is crinoline by DIY, which is kind of this kind of beigey, creamy color. And I'm going to paint the entire thing this way. Now, you could paint your molds as soon as you've glued them on, but I prefer to either wait till they're dry or at least wait till they've kind of firmed up so that as I'm painting them, I'm not going to be having to baby them too much that, you know, I don't want to risk kind of painting a little too hard and ruining some of the detail, especially, I mean, you know, on this door with all those lovely little leaves and things. So I'm going to get my first coat on this and then determine whether or not I need a second. I'm thinking I'm not going to need a second on my molds and my toilet paper backing because they'll absorb a lot of the paint really well. But I do think that some of the slick surfaces of my frame likely will need 2 coats. So I'll see what it needs, I'll do what it needs, and then we'll come back as we start to do some of the treatments to bring out some of the details on this. Our piece has got 2 coats of the crinoline on the frame because it was kind of slick. It needed the 2 coats. This is where we're at so far. So what we're looking at doing now is doing some aging, and we're going to do a couple of different things. This is completely unsealed. So what we're going to start with is I want to use DIY Dark and Decrepit on the frame. Now, adding this onto the frame with it unsealed means that top coat, that sealer, that patina, is going to sink down into the paint. So we're gonna want to wipe that away fairly quickly. Don't leave it to dry or it's gonna, but we get this nice aged kind of patina look. Now we're gonna be doing some different aging on some of the other elements. We've got some decrepit dust, we've got some dark wax. You could just use one of these elements on here and that would be okay. But I'm gonna kind of flip back and forth. And they're all in the same brown tone. So it's not like it's gonna be weird. And you see I have these, the molds underneath, just so that when the paint was drying, it was raised up and it wasn't gonna stick to my cardboard. Not really an issue for me now. You know, you just use what you got. So those just happened to make just awesome risers for my frame as it was drying out. Now I'm just using a lint-free rag and I'm just wiping it back. And we get this textured look because of the brush marks that I had on the piece. All right, so now I want to do the same thing on the front. The only thing I need to be careful of is where I've overlapped some of my elements into kind of the center. Now, the difference here is that I don't want to wait so long because I've got a lot of details there. So I'm going to want to wipe back sooner. But look at that sitting in all those grooves. So I'm going to get the rest of the frame done and I have a small brush to be able to go around the elements elsewhere. And then we're going to come back and I'll show you what we're going to do for the rest of the piece. All right, the frame is done with the dark and decrepit and it's just kind of highlighted everything. Now everything is really going to be in that same kind of tone. I just wanted the frame to potentially be a little bit darker. It's now sealed. The dark and decrepit works as a sealer. It can be a top coat. And in essence, that part's done. We're gonna do a little more to it after. Can't leave things alone. But the rest is going to get, and I had here we go, a clear wax brush over here. The rest is gonna get a coating of clear wax on it. And it's fine. Okay, that one had some paint chips in it. Let's get a different one. Avalanche of things. Okay, and it's fine for this to also go over any of the places that you've got dark and decrepit as well. So extra sealer never hurts anything. So I don't have to be super cautious with this. Now, what I do want to do is have different variations. I mean, you know, as we're adding some of the aging to this, as we're adding some of those additional sepia tones, I don't want it to all be this same kind of flat look as the frame is, right? So, I mean, I could have just painted the whole thing with the dark and decrepit, but I want to have some variation. So I do have there we go. I do have some dark wax and I have some decrepit dust. So I can use each of those products in different ways. And I do have the water that I cleaned my dark and decrepit brushes out in. Because, I mean, it's going to resist them a little bit, but I was thinking that might also work to add a little something. The wax is going to resist that because this is, the wax has some oil in it, right? As a sealer, so it's going to resist elements, but you know, it's another aspect of this that we can play with. So I'm just looking for a not good brush to add some of the decrepit dust and some of the wax in. And so I'm just going to take some of the dust and pounce it off. If you put it straight into the jar, it's going to carry a lot. And I just want to kind of rub some of the dust into just some of the leaves around that door. Just bringing out a little bit of detail. And this is, the decrepit dust is a less harsh treatment than the dark wax. And I don't mean harsh, but it's not as, it's a softer look. So let me get a little bit of contrast happening here for you. Okay, so there's a little bit of the dust on there. I'm going to take another kind of jaggedy thing, and I'm going to do some of this down into some of the wood slats. So this is some of the dark wax. I'm just going to get the lid over here. And here's the look of the door. And I hope that what you can see is that the leaves are a little bit softer looking. The wood on the door and on the bricks is a little bit deeper. It's a little bit more rustic. It kind of fits with that. And that's really kind of what I was hoping to be able to get with some of this, was a little bit of shading, you know, like I don't want to do the entire mushroom. I want to have some of that cream showing through. I can use my cloth to be able to wipe some of that wax back and have a little bit of variation. Now, what I am doing is I am taking that wash, you know, from my dirty brushes, and I'm going to put it on the background. Now you can see that my wax is resisting because it's serving as barrier for this. But I'm going to let that kind of sit up on top, and then I'm just going to kind of pounce. So I won't be removing it all. And what it will do is kind of sit into all of those little details that we had pressed into the background. So it's going to be aging it, but it's still going to leave it quite light. But again, it's going to be all in those same tones. So we've only got really 2 colors working here. And I'll be doing some projects with these with some color. But I just wanted to kind of play with the details of the pieces, going for just that kind of sepia tone. Although, you know, in all honesty, we are going to add a little bit of metallic in next, so hang in there. I'm just going to finish getting this part done and letting it dry, which again, it's not a lot of paint, and it should dry quite quickly. And then we'll be able to add our little finishing touch. But I'm really impressed with our toilet paper background, how well it's taking that color, and how well it took the paint. And okay, so now that I've got the background on, what I'm going to do is I'm just, whoa, that was an accident waiting to happen. I'm just going to take a little bit more of my dark wax and a little bit more of my powder, add it into some of the spaces where I just need a little bit more contrast happening. Letting that all kind of dry up, and then we'll be back for the last step. So this is kind of the definition of the picture now, which looks great. It's fine as is. I'm going to add a little metallic, so I'm going to add little pennies from heaven. I just think the little bit of the copper on some of the detail is going to look great. But you could finish, you could be done. Get this all unstuck. Okay, and again, I'm just taking a really rough brush. I have some plastic on this board, and I just want to kind of brush this really lightly over a little bit of the details. So this is something that is just, it's going to be subtle, right? But when I do it over here, it's going to be subtle on the border detail, because that's quite dark. But over here on my flowers, because I'm just kind of going over the top, it's kind of hitting them and pulling out a little bit more of the detail. So I'm not going to do it on the background or any of that, but I am going to hit it here and there. And let me show you one side of the door. This side has some of the copper, the other side does not. So it's not in your face, it's still pretty subtle, but it's definitely having a little bit more of those details pop. And so I'm gonna add that, and then we're done. And here's our finished piece. So for me, and I'll take close-up pics so that you can see it finished, but a couple of things about this. I love, when I first get molds, I love using them where it's just pretty monotone, where it's, you know, just to see what the detail of them is, to be able to get my head around it. I think for this, the copper, for me, kind of just brought it out a little bit, added a little bit more definition, and yeah, love that. Now you could do exactly the same thing as this and paint your frame white and distress it. You could do your textured background with some color if you want, adding some greens. It's yours. Do whatever you want. But I hope with this, it gives you an idea, one, of kind of tone on tone, doing a little bit of that sepia kind of feel, but also just that toilet paper and that glue mixture, how you can use that to be able to impress in the background. I mean, look at all of that wonderful texture that we got there, and using it to create your own molds, right? So you could mold your items in there, and these are so super light. Think about that for some of your paper projects as well. So couple of extra little tips, hopefully, to put into your toolkit that you can use against your next project, whatever it may be. I look forward to seeing you on the next one. Check out the website, queenbeecreationshome.com. And until then, take care.